The air over Chicago's ruins tasted like rust and smoke, the stench of old wars that had never truly ended. Once towers had gleamed here, glass spires clawing the sky with human pride. Now they were husks, splintered skeletons wrapped in vines and silence. Elias Veynar stood atop a collapsed freeway, boots grinding against broken stone, watching the horizon for signs that hope might still exist. His chest rose with steady control, but his eyes carried the weight of battles he had never wanted to fight, scars etched across his jaw like permanent reminders of promises broken. Below him, men huddled around fires built from scavenged wood and scraps of plastic. They spoke in low tones, their voices harsh, edged by hunger. Humanity had shrunk into pockets of survival, fractured tribes scraping out existence amid decay. Elias, against his own better judgment, had become one of their leaders. The last war had left him with no medals, no honors, only the resolve that he would not watch his species die on its knees. Dr. Marcus Hale emerged from the shadow of a burned-out overpass, a gaunt figure with sharp eyes magnified by cracked lenses. He carried the smell of oil and smoke, hands blackened with grease from coaxing ancient machines back to life. He was younger than Elias by a decade, yet his face bore its own ruin, dark lines under his eyes, lips curled in constant irritation. A cigarette burned between his fingers, a habit scavenged from crumbling packs still found in old gas stations. He coughed, flicked ash and muttered, "If this planet doesn't kill us, our stupidity will. Sooner or later." Elias didn't answer. He had learned that Marcus's bitterness was both shield and weapon, a blade directed outward to keep despair from consuming him. Their bond was one of necessity, two men dragged together by circumstance, not friendship. Yet in the desolation, necessity was enough. From the eastern street, a boy's shout cut through the gloom. Jonah Kael came running, breathless, stumbling over shattered concrete with the reckless speed of youth. 17 at most, his hair was a wild mat of dirt, his clothes torn from scavenging. He skidded to a stop before Elias, chest heaving, eyes bright with a kind of desperate energy that hadn't yet been beaten out of him. "Smoke," he gasped. "Not ours. In the sky. It's not a storm." Elias stiffened. He lifted his gaze. At first he thought Jonah was exaggerating, some illusion conjured by hunger and imagination. But the clouds bore strange light, arcs of color that pulsed unnaturally, rolling in layered waves. Sparks cut across the heavens like veins of fire. The noise came next, low, thrumming, a vibration that rattled bones. Marcus's cigarette slipped from his lips, extinguished against the cracked pavement. "That's not weather," he said quietly. "That's a ship." The others emerged from the camp, drawn by the sound. Men stared upward with hollow eyes, hope and fear colliding inside them. For centuries humanity had dreamed of contact, of salvation arriving from beyond the stars. Maybe, some whispered, this was rescue, deliverance from hunger, sickness and rot. But Elias's gut twisted with instinct honed by too many betrayals. He had seen what salvation cost when promised by powerful men on earth. He doubted it would be cheaper when promised by beings from the void. By nightfall the shapes became visible. Sleek vessels cut through the atmosphere, glowing with alien fire. They did not descend cautiously. They claimed the sky as conquerors. The ground shuddered beneath Elias's boots as the first ship pierced the horizon and landed in the gutted heart of the city. Dust rolled outward in a choking wave. He pulled Jonah close and barked for the others to fall back to shelter. Marcus's hands trembled as he fumbled with his battered radio equipment, tuning through static to catch fragments of transmissions. Elias watched the newcomer's hull unfold, metallic wings peeling apart to release towering figures onto the ash-choked street. The Seraphis Dominion did not look like saviors. They were tall, armored in iridescent plating that shimmered like liquid glass. Their movements carried arrogance, precise and deliberate, as though Earth were theirs by ancestral right. Their voices cut through the air, resonant and cold, speaking in a language that bent the ear with strange harmonics. Then, suddenly, Marcus's receiver hissed and translated enough for Elias to understand. "This world is resource," the voice declared. "Its inhabitants are inconsequential." Elias's jaw locked. Around him, men lowered their eyes, retreating into silence. Jonah clenched his fists, fury radiating from his trembling frame. "We can fight them," he said, voice cracking with raw conviction. "We can't just let them take everything." Elias turned on him sharply, grip firm on the boy's shoulder. "Not yet," he warned. "They're stronger. Faster. You go charging out there and you'll die before you even lift a blade." Jonah's face twisted with frustration, but he obeyed, though his silence boiled like a storm. The Seraphis wasted no time. Massive machines slid from their ships, plunging drills into the earth. The sound was a metallic shriek, vibrating through concrete and steel as ancient soil gave way. The land trembled under their hunger. Elias's men watched helplessly, powerless as the planet itself was consumed before their eyes. Marcus whispered almost to himself, "They're not here for us. They're here for what's under us." That night, the fires burned lower, their meager warmth swallowed by dread. Elias walked the perimeter alone, his rifle slung across his back, though he knew it would be useless. He looked toward the horizon, where alien towers already rose, spires of living metal drinking the marrow of the earth. His fists clenched, nails biting his palms. For the first time in years he felt something deeper than despair, something closer to fury. These beings hadn't come to save or to reason. They had come to strip his world bare, to grind humanity into dust like weeds choking their harvest. And in that realization, Elias felt his path crystallize. The boy Jonah had been right. To fight now was madness, but to yield was suicide. Somewhere between those truths lay survival, and Elias intended to carve it out, whatever it cost. He thought of all the graves he had stood over, all the battles lost by inches, all the blood soaked into soil already ruined. This would not be one more defeat added to the pile. His breath came slow and measured as he whispered to the dark, words meant for no one but himself. "They should have left us alone." And though no one heard him, the night seemed to hold its breath, as if the earth itself agreed. The weeks that followed were a study in humiliation. The Seraphis Dominion moved with merciless efficiency, their ships spreading across the continents like disease. In every city they landed, they built extraction zones, fortified platforms where colossal machines drilled into the crust and siphoned what lay beneath. The soil grew black, poisoned. Rivers boiled where alien chemicals bled into them. Those who resisted were annihilated. Those who submitted were rounded up, collared with shimmering restraints, and herded to labor like cattle. Humanity's proud cities, already ruined by its own hand, became carcasses stripped by predators who saw no difference between man and stone. Elias Veynar watched it happen, jaw tight, fists restless. His enclave had survived the first wave by hiding in tunnels and shattered basements, but survival was no victory. Every day he scanned the horizon, every night he counted the dwindling supplies. He told himself they were waiting, gathering strength, but he knew the truth. Fear pinned them in place. Men under his command had started whispering about surrender, about trading freedom for the scraps of alien mercy. Elias understood the temptation. But he also remembered the Dominion's voice, calm and cold, dismissing humanity as inconsequential. He could not kneel before creatures who saw them as less than vermin. Marcus Hale obsessed over fragments of captured technology. He worked by lantern light in a forgotten subway station, hunched over coils of alien alloy and circuit boards scavenged from wreckage. His hands shook as he connected wires, his lips muttering equations, theories, curses. Elias often found him like that, surrounded by sparks and the smell of burning insulation. "They're arrogant," Marcus would say, voice gravelly from smoke and sleeplessness. "They've layered brilliance atop fragility. You peel back the shine, and you'll find a system like any other. And systems can be broken." His obsession was more than curiosity. It was guilt, festering deep. He had trusted once before years ago, when foreign governments promised salvation with advanced drones and nanotech. His family had died when those machines turned hostile. He had sworn never to trust power again. If breaking the Seraphis was the only way to atone, he would break them piece by piece. Jonah Kael grew restless with waiting. The boy was fire where Elias was stone. His anger too sharp to be dulled by caution. He slipped from camp whenever he could, scavenging among alien patrol routes, testing boundaries, daring the Dominion to notice him. Elias scolded him, punished him, but the boy's energy could not be shackled. He wanted action, any action, even if it burned him alive. One night he didn't return. By dawn, Elias's scouts reported seeing him dragged into an extraction zone, chained and beaten but still screaming defiance. Elias had expected it. The boy was a spark in dry grass, bound to ignite. Still the loss hit him like a blade. He saw the hope draining from the men's faces, the silent question in their eyes. Would he risk them all for a reckless youth? Elias did not answer aloud. Instead he went to Marcus. "We can't wait," he said, his voice low but steady. "They're taking him to break him. Or worse, to use him as bait." Marcus removed his glasses, rubbed his raw eyes, and studied Elias with a look that weighed steel against fire. "If we move now, we risk everything," he warned. "If we wait, the boy's gone. And so is morale." Elias leaned closer, voice carrying the edge of a blade. "Then we move." The ambush came 3 nights later under a sky thick with ash. Elias led the strike himself. His men crawling through sewers and broken alleys until the glowing walls of the extraction zone loomed above them. The Seraphis guarded the perimeter in pairs, their armor gleaming with cold light, their weapons humming with deadly charge. Elias signaled, and the silence shattered. Gunfire rattled, crude but effective, echoing against steel. Grenades improvised from propane tanks exploded, shattering alien formations. The first Seraphis fell hard, its tall body convulsing under the storm of bullets. For a moment, disbelief froze Elias, then he drove his blade through its throat, watching black blood spurt against the dirt. The giant thrashed, then stilled. The victory was not clean. Men screamed as plasma fire cut through them. The ground burned where alien weapons struck, leaving charred corpses behind. But the impossible had happened. A Seraphis warrior lay dead at their feet. The men stared in shock, their fear cracked open by sudden, feral hope. "They're not gods," Elias shouted above the chaos. "They bleed. They break. Just like us." Marcus dragged Jonah free from a holding cage. His body battered but his spirit burning bright. The boy spat blood and cursed at his captors even as Elias lifted him onto his shoulder. They retreated under covering fire, stumbling through smoke and ruin, but with proof that the Dominion was not invincible. The cost was heavy, half their fighters gone, scorched or crushed. Yet in the eyes of the survivors, Elias saw a new fire, one that hadn't existed the night before. Back in the tunnels, Marcus knelt beside the corpse they had dragged home, prying at the alien's armor with a scavenged crowbar. The body twitched once before falling still. Marcus examined its flesh, veins, and circuitry woven through muscle. "Red," he whispered, his voice trembling between awe and fury. "They bleed red." His gaze flicked to Elias. "They're not untouchable. They've just built enough walls to make us believe it." Elias said nothing. He sat against the cold stone, Jonah asleep beside him, his shoulder bandaged and bloodstained. The camp around them buzzed with whispers of victory, of vengeance. Elias closed his eyes, hearing again the Dominion's decree, dismissing Earth as inconsequential. That arrogance was their strength. But perhaps, he thought, it could also be their undoing. The firelight flickered against his scarred face as he opened his eyes once more. The war had not yet begun, but for the first time since the ships had arrived, Elias believed it could. The Seraphis had drawn first blood, but humanity had finally struck back. And in that fragile, furious victory, the seeds of defiance had been sown. Word of the dead Seraphis spread like wildfire. In the ruins of cities and the shadow of forests, whispers carried faster than truth usually traveled. A single alien corpse, dragged through the tunnels beneath Chicago, became a symbol greater than any flag. Humanity, once fractured into starving enclaves, began to stir with something dangerous: belief. Elias Veynar felt it in every stare that followed him through the camp. Men who once looked at him with resignation now looked with expectation, as if he had become more than flesh, more than leader. He did not want the mantle of legend, but he wore it because the alternative was silence, and silence was death. Jonah Kael limped through the tunnels, his body scarred from captivity, his spirit sharper than ever. He refused rest, refused pity. Where others whispered, he roared. "They can be killed," he declared to anyone who would listen. His youthful fire infecting older men who had forgotten how to stand tall. He became the reckless voice of defiance, his hunger for revenge burning away hesitation. Elias tried to temper him, but secretly he envied the boy's untamed rage. It was the kind of fire Elias had lost long ago, buried beneath discipline and scars. Marcus Hale worked without pause, dissecting the alien corpse like a scholar searching scripture. His makeshift lab filled with a glow of scavenged lights, the air thick with acrid fumes as he tore apart armor, wires and flesh. Every discovery fueled him. "Their strength is borrowed," he muttered, holding up a shard of circuitry. "All of it flows through the same system, a network tying soldier to ship, ship to hub. Take the hub and you cut the thread. Take enough threads, and the tapestry unravels." His eyes burned feverishly, his hands trembling as though holding the key to salvation. Elias listened, arms folded, the weight of command pressing heavy. Marcus's theory offered hope, but hope was dangerous. Hope meant choices, risks, blood spilled for a chance at something more than survival. He knew once he unleashed his men on this path, there would be no turning back. Yet each day the Seraphis grew bolder, sterilizing swaths of land with their weapons, reducing forests to ash and rivers to boiling sludge. In the distance, colossal dreadnoughts scoured entire regions clean of life, their shadows blotting out the sun. Jonah returned one night with news that his old scavenger camp had been obliterated, every friend he had ever known reduced to smoke. His voice broke when he spoke, but his eyes shone with unrelenting fury. "They took everything. I'll take it back with fire." The boy's grief pushed the camp from simmering defiance to raw determination. Men sharpened blades, rebuilt weapons, scavenged ammunition. Small groups launched raids against patrols, vanishing back into shadows before retaliation could catch them. For the first time, Elias saw Seraphis patrols move with caution, their arrogance cracked by ambushes they could not predict. Humanity was learning, adapting, striking like wolves against a stronger beast. Yet victory never came free. Each raid returned with fewer men than it had left, and every fallen fighter carved grief into Elias's chest. He carried their names like weights, yet he dared not show weakness. He reminded them of Jonah's words, reminded them of Marcus's discoveries, reminded them of the alien who bled red. He stood tall so they could believe, even as his own doubts gnawed like rats in the dark. Marcus's breakthrough came during one of those nights. He gathered Elias and Jonah in the lab, showing them a projection cobbled together from alien fragments. A glowing lattice filled the air, a web of energy connecting points across the planet. "This is how they control their forces," Marcus explained, his voice vibrating with triumph. "A psionic hub. Every soldier, every ship, every machine, they draw coordination from this system. You sever the hub and they lose order. They become scattered, weaker, vulnerable." His finger stabbed toward a highlighted node on the map. "The central hub. It's here. New York." Elias stared at the glowing point, memories of that city rising unbidden, skyscrapers glittering in the sun, streets alive with voices, now all swallowed by alien machinery. He felt the enormity of it press on his chest. "If we strike there," he said, voice steady, "we don't just fight for scraps. We fight for the world." Jonah's fists clenched, eyes blazing. "Then we go. No more hiding. No more waiting. We burn their hub to the ground." But Marcus's expression turned grim. "It won't be easy. The Seraphis know its value. Their strongest hold it. We'll need more than rage. We'll need strategy, coordination, sacrifice." Elias met his gaze, then Jonah's. Both men looked at him, one with fire, the other with intellect, both waiting for his word. He felt the weight of the decision pressing harder than any he had carried before. He thought of the men who already looked at him as more than human, the men who needed him to be unbreakable. He thought of the graves that lined the earth, graves that would multiply unless someone drew a line. Slowly he nodded. "Then we prepare. Every blade, every bullet, every scrap we can wield, we gather it all. And when the time comes we strike. Not as prey. Not as scavengers. As men of earth." The camp erupted with motion in the days that followed. Runners were sent to distant enclaves, spreading word of the hub, calling scattered survivors to arms. For the first time since the Dominion arrived, enclaves answered. Farmers from the south, hunters from the forests, soldiers from forgotten bases. All began to converge on the ruins of Chicago, drawn by the promise of a single strike that could turn the tide. Elias watched them arrive, hardened faces carrying worn rifles, blades, and determination. He felt the ember of something old flicker to life, something humanity had not carried in years. Unity. One night, as preparations thundered in the tunnels, Elias stood alone above the city ruins, the alien spires gleaming like diseased growths against the horizon. Jonah approached, still limping but carrying himself with pride. He stood beside Elias without speaking, eyes fixed on the enemy that had stolen his youth. At last he muttered, "Do you think we can win?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He thought of Marcus, buried in wires and circuits, risking sanity for discovery. He thought of Jonah, refusing to break even in chains. He thought of the men sharpening their weapons below, faces set with grim determination. Slowly he turned to the boy. "I don't think we can," he admitted, voice low. "I know we must." Jonah nodded, and in his silence there was no doubt, only acceptance. The following dawn, Marcus unveiled the first of his makeshift weapons. Rifles that spat bursts of electromagnetic force, blades coated in scavenged plasma, viruses coded to slip into alien systems like poison. Crude, imperfect, but deadly. The men who wielded them held the weapons as if they were relics, each one a promise that humanity could adapt faster than the Seraphis expected. The Dominion struck back harder that week. Dreadnoughts scoured more land, sterilizing entire forests. Refugees poured in, broken and hollow. Yet even as the world burned further, the resistance grew. Fear had turned into fury, despair into determination. On the eve of their march to New York, Elias gathered his men in the ruined cathedral that served as their hall. Firelight flickered across stone walls blackened by war. He stood before them, his voice steady, his gaze unyielding. A roar answered him, a sound born not of desperation but of defiance, the kind of sound that could shatter chains. And as dawn broke over the smoking horizon, Elias led them forward, not into survival, but into war. The ruins of New York loomed like the bones of a giant, skyscrapers half-eaten by alien machinery, streets carved open by drills that pulsed with eerie light. What had once been humanity's proudest city now served as the beating heart of the Seraphis Dominion's occupation, their psionic hub throbbing at its center like a diseased organ. Elias Veynar stood among his gathered fighters, the cold wind cutting through the cracked glass of a shattered cathedral where they had made their last council. His face was carved from resolve, but within him surged a storm of doubt and fury. This was the final march, the moment where belief either became victory or ashes. Jonah Kael walked at his side, shoulders squared despite the limp that marked his captivity. His youth was gone, burned away by grief and fury, replaced with the steel of a man who had nothing left to lose. He carried explosives strapped across his chest, eyes sharp, expression unwavering. The boy who had once spoken in reckless boasts now spoke only with action, his silence heavier than words. Beside them, Marcus Hale adjusted the straps of the crude transmitter slung over his back, its wires snaking into a device he had built from alien scraps. His fingers twitched as if still soldering circuits, his mind tethered more to calculations than prayers. He had become gaunt, a ghost of himself, but his eyes gleamed with grim certainty. The hub was a network of thought and signal. If he could pierce it, he could tear it down. They moved under cover of smoke, slipping through gutted avenues where fire still smoldered from sterilization raids. Resistance fighters from across the continent marched with them, hundreds of men carrying scavenged rifles and blades that glowed faintly with Marcus's stolen plasma. They moved like shadows, yet their presence carried the weight of a people finally unified by shared fury. For the first time since the ships had come, Earth's sons marched not as prey but as predators. The Seraphis met them with cold precision. Towers unfolded into living turrets, their beams of light scorching the street and vaporizing men in screams of steam. Alien warriors advanced in disciplined lines, armor gleaming, weapons crackling with energy. Elias roared commands, directing fighters into ruined buildings where they struck from the shadows. The city became a labyrinth of fire and steel, humans turning rubble into weapons, collapsing bridges onto patrols, dragging enemies into close combat where knives and fists cut deeper than fear. For every man that fell, two more surged forward, driven by rage that outpaced despair. Jonah led a squad through a sewer tunnel that opened beneath the alien defenses, his body moving with reckless precision. Explosions shook the ground above them, dust raining from the ceiling. When they emerged inside the perimeter, alien fire greeted them, cutting men down in sprays of burning light. Jonah sprinted through it, his explosives strapped tight, his voice rising in a battle cry that carried through the chaos. He slammed into the barricades, detonators primed, his last glance back a defiant grin. The blast ripped through the Seraphis defenses, tearing open a path for the main force to surge forward. The boy's body vanished in fire, but his defiance burned brighter than his flesh ever had. Elias felt the explosion in his bones, a hollow ache that cracked something inside him. But he did not falter. He drove his men forward through the smoke, his rifle bucking in his hands, his blade flashing as he met a Seraphis commander in brutal combat. The alien towered above him, strength amplified by armor, but Elias fought like the earth itself had poured its rage into his veins. Blades clashed, sparks flew, each strike rattling his arms to the bone. The alien snarled in its strange layered tongue, but Elias did not hear words, only the insult of its presence on his soil. With a roar, he drove his knife through the creature's throat, twisting until its blood spilled hot across his scarred hands. Meanwhile, Marcus reached the hub. It rose like a cathedral of alien light, its walls pulsating with energy, tendrils burrowing into the ground as if drinking the marrow of the planet. He staggered toward it, transmitter strapped tight, sweat pouring as psionic feedback clawed at his mind. Each step was a battle against whispers that weren't his own, alien voices clawing into his thoughts, promising power if he submitted, silence if he broke. He screamed through it, his voice raw, fingers flying across controls as he forced his device into the lattice. Sparks erupted, circuits melted. His body convulsed as if the hub itself were feeding on him. But he pressed harder, veins bulging, eyes wide with fury and purpose. "Not my world," he gasped, blood dripping from his nose. "Not my species." The hub screamed. Light fractured into shards, the ground convulsing as the lattice unraveled. Across the city, Seraphis weapons flickered, ships stuttered in the sky, their coordination dissolving into chaos. Dreadnoughts tilted and crashed into buildings, crushing streets in waves of steel and fire. Alien warriors stumbled, their movements jerky, cohesion lost as their psionic bond shattered. Humanity pressed the advantage, descending upon them with blades, bullets, and bare hands, the air filled with the roar of a species unleashed. Marcus collapsed, smoke rising from his device, his chest heaving shallow breaths. Elias reached him, dragging his broken body away as the hub's walls split and collapsed in a storm of sparks. Marcus's lips curled into a faint, bloodied smile. "Told you," he whispered. "Systems can be broken." His eyes closed, his chest stilling, the weight of his sacrifice carved into the silence that followed. By dawn, the battlefield lay in ruins. Alien ships smoldered, their once proud forms shattered across the streets. The Seraphis survivors fled in panic, abandoning the planet they had thought already conquered. Humanity stood amid the wreckage, battered, bloodied, but unbroken. Men embraced, wept, lifted their dead with trembling hands, their cries filling the morning with something greater than grief. Elias stood on the steps of the ruined hub, his body aching, his hands stained with blood not his own. He gazed across the burning city, where the first rays of sunlight pierced the smoke. The world was scarred, broken, but it was theirs. He thought of Jonah's fire, Marcus's brilliance, of all the men who had fallen to bring them here. He thought of the Dominion's first words, dismissing humanity as inconsequential. His voice was low but steady as he spoke to the dawn. "We're still here. And now they'll remember why." In the silence that followed, Earth itself seemed to exhale. The Seraphis Dominion retreated into the void, their legend of supremacy cracked by a species they had underestimated. Across the stars, whispers spread of a small world at the edge of the galaxy, a world whose sons had bled and fought with a fury unlike any other. They called it Earth, the world they should have left alone.